So yeah, in this case, this is where I would sort of fork off and go do a different method. So yeah, I think in this one is there. Yeah, this one I think still has technically separate overlapping parts, let's say. And again, it's really complicated for Zbrush to handle that. So I'll show you what happens. So if I append, let's say, the other axe here. So this thing I've already unwrapped and all that sort of stuff, right? So I'll show you what happens when you try to do a projectile. Oops, let me just cancel that actually. Just want to make sure I'm selecting the low res. If I do projectile, you see what can happen is the object doesn't always know which surface to project to. It can get very confused. Oh, I think the other issue is I still have that rotational issue, so let me just fix that actually as well. There. So correct that if I can. So that was part of it too. Mismatched surfaces, that's a big deal. Okay. So again, let me go back in here and project all. Again, once we get to higher division levels, it'll definitely kind of show itself more. Project all. It won't always know which surface you're projecting to, especially in these seam areas. So you'll sort of get weird spikes and stuff like that. So that's one reason why I do find it ideal to sort of look at your model. It's 1,000,000 polys overall with all these divisions and these separate subtools. You can basically dynamesh that together to create that solid shell. But again, you have to make sure there's no gaps. This has potentially a deep cavity, so you can either kind of inflate that closed, just a very, very small amount, or better yet, B for brush, P for pinch. You can kind of pinch that stuff together and then dynamesh it to sort of seal it up, right? But again, dynamesh it so it meets or exceeds your resolution and doesn't drastically destroy your details at all, right? So that's another good factor here. So again, you can sort of see that there's a cavity in there, so you want to try your best to pinch. For me, I prefer a little bit of inflate in those regions. Now, if you're not using ZBrush, though, I would say this is actually much less of an issue because we can simply, if we're using Substance, we can literally, take the raw high res, whether it's multiple subtools. I'm not sure if there's one in here with subtools, but if you had multiple subtools, you could actually just literally go in, only make the visible high-res stuff there, go to all high, and then say merge visible. So that would kind of merge into one tool, and you would export that, okay? In this case, it's already merged into one subtool, the high-res, so I'm literally just going to go to export. I'll just set this to my D drive. I'll say HP for high poly _ ax. Okay, take this one and go to exports as well, and I'll say, by the way, I should make sure I'm on, what's it called, the lowest division. If I was playing around with division, so I'm going to just delete higher for now. Yeah, let me just delete higher. There we go. Now again, you have to have UVs, so that does matter. You can't be just exporting a low-res mesh with no UVs. It's not going to give you anything. So export this into, I usually just call this LP for low poly. Okay, so I'll go to Substance, Painter. Another good thing to do is sometimes it gets confusing. You're working between like 2 to 3 softwares, and sometimes like I'll go Z this and fix the UVs in Maya, and then re-export maybe from Maya. Usually it's a good idea if you're exporting your low res from ZBrush, keep exporting from ZBrush. So if I send this to Maya to fix, I would go Z it back from here and export from here to then bring back into Substance. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to just close this. I don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to go to File, New. For your template, the best thing to do is just go to PBR. Specular glossiness is fine. Document resolution 4K is what I usually pick. And I don't need to import any kind of baking maps or anything like that, but you do have to select your file. So for this, I'm going to select my low poly. That's going to be my base, okay? So I'll say OK. It'll bring it in, right? And then I'm going to go to texture sets. Let's see, texture set settings. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go to mesh maps and go to bake mesh maps. So in this case, for this assignment, it's very, very basic. I just really want to capture the modeling details. So I'm going to turn off everything but the normal map. And I'm going to click under common settings. Output size is going to be 4K. You can pick 8K as well. Sometimes it's kind of useful as a hack or a trick. Some artists will output at the next highest resolution and then scale it down with Photoshop to try to pack a little more detail in, because sometimes you get very good kind of almost like AI-based sharpening when you scale things down that way. Dilation width. So remember that 16 pixel border I was talking about? This is where that is going to expand that. Okay. And we want to load. So under high definition meshes, you click on this little kind of like paper icon and load your high poly mesh. Okay. And then we're just simply going to say bake selected textures, and you'll see it kind of render out something. And then we'll go to File, Export Textures. So I'm just going to click on this and just set it to my D drive. Again, you would set this to your Maya project folder or wherever you're working on this from. So I'll hit Select Folder. And for the, at least for the normal map, I want this to be a TIFF at 16 bits. Yeah, so basically 16 bits is high enough resolution or high enough color information. I think 8 bits produces something like 24 million colors, and 16 bits produces something like 250 billion colors. So you get much, much more detail from your baking and your objects this way. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm just going to go to Export. And if I head over to Maya, so this is the Zbrush based one, which is fine. It looks good, but I'll go in here and click on and load the one from my D drive here. There it is. Again, every time you load, it defaults back to sRGB, so you want to just go back to RAW. And there it is there. So now again, I think this is turning out okay, but it looks like there might be some issue in here. Let me just make sure that's actually set properly to RAW. And I'll step back out of here and drop the bump depth a little bit. So one thing you can see that I will mention, as I said, is that you know, sometimes these surfaces, they don't know, because these are overlapping mesh, it doesn't know that it's supposed to kind of fit that shape the way it does. So here, let me go to polyframe. So again, that issue, as I mentioned, of there being a gap in here between meshes is still showing up in Substance. It does a better job of handling it, I will say, than ZBrush, and it's a lot cleaner. So you can still get potentially a fairly good result overall. But it is something that I just thought you should know of and be aware of, that can still pop up and cause you some issues, you know. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, my preference, I think, generally is still to try to kind of dynamesh things down flat into a solid single high poly mesh. Okay.